Hey everyone. Okay, so let's go over exercises for section 5.5. So the exercises or the problems start on page 172 in your textbook. So problem number 1, an item cost $37.25 was marked up by 60% of cost. Okay, so we know that C equals $37.25. We know that the selling price equals your cost plus your markup. So $37.25 plus 60% or 0.6 times $37.25, which gives you an additional $22.35. Add that to the $37.25 and it gives you the selling price of $59.60. Okay. Later, the retail price was reduced to $41.72. Okay, so now we're going to look at the selling price reduced. So we have $41.72 is our reduced selling price, and we know that that is equal to the cost plus expenses plus profit. So it's telling us that if the unit overhead expenses were 20% of cost, what was the unit operating profit at the reduced price? So if we look at the reduced, $41.72 equals our cost, which is $37.25, our expenses, which is $37.25 multiplied by 20%, and then any of the rest would be profit. So we've got to have the profit or the P by itself. So we move everything over to the other side. So they're positive on the right-hand side. So we need to subtract them from the right and the left. That will clear them out of the right-hand side. But on the left, it would leave $41.72 minus $31.25 minus $7.45, which is the expenses, equals your profit. But that gives us minus $2.98, or our profit is actually a loss of $2.98. Okay. So when you look at it realistically, the company probably shouldn't reduce it by that much because they should at least break even, which would mean that the profit would amount to zero. But at that rate, and if they reduce it to the $41.72, they will have a loss of $2.98. Okay, so problem 3. Elite Sports sells hockey sticks for $147 each. So that is your selling price of $147. Elite wholesale cost is $98, so that's how much they buy it for. So the cost, or C, is $98. For a spring clearance sale, the price was marked down by 20%. So we'll look at the reduced selling price equals S multiplied by 1 minus your D. So 147, multiply that by 1 minus 0.20, or multiply it by 80%, and it comes up to a reduced selling price of $117.60. Okay. So if overhead expenses are 15% of regular price, so not 15% of the cost, 15% of the regular price, which is your $147, what is the unit operating profit at the sale price? Okay, so our profit based on the reduced selling price equals the reduced selling price minus any costs minus any expenses. Okay, right? Because your costs and your expenses subtracted from what you sell it for is the leftover is your profit. So we know the reduced selling price is $117.60 minus off the cost, which is $98, minus off the expenses, which is again 15% or 0.15 of the original selling price, which is $147. So it's $117.60 minus your $98 minus $22.05 for your expenses, and anything that's left is your profit. But unfortunately, again, they've reduced it just a little bit too much, and they actually have a loss of $2.45 on that hockey stick. So again, realistically, they probably should not mark it down that low to the $117.60, because they should at least break even. And that would be having a profit of 0. You don't want to take a loss in a company unless you absolutely have to. Okay, so problem 7. The retailer pays $81 to a wholesaler for an article. Okay, so $81 is the cost to the retailer. The retail price is set using 40% rate of markup on selling prices. Okay, so we need to figure out what the selling price is. So the selling price is equal to $81, which is your cost, plus 40% of the selling price. That's your markup. Okay. So looking at this, we've got S's on both sides. One side we have a full S, the other side we have 0.4 of an S. So again, we need to get like items together. So we need to move that 0.4 S over to the left-hand side of the equation. And the way we do that is to subtract 0.4 S from both sides. So that will leave us with S minus 0.4 S equals 81. Combine these two together. S minus 0.4 S leaves 0.6 S equals 81. Now we need to get rid of the 0.6. So because it's a multiplication, 0.6 multiplied by S, we need to divide both sides by 0.6. So that leaves us S equals 81 divided by 0.6. For S, the selling price is $135. Okay, so from here, to increase traffic to his store, the retailer marks the article down 20% during the sale. What is the sale price? So we've got S reduced equals our selling price. Multiply that by 1 minus 0.2, because you're marking it down by 0.2. So therefore, you've got 135, multiply that by 80, gives you a reduced selling price of $108. All right, final question, problem 13. Rainbow Paints is discounting a line of paint that it purchased at $30 less 45% and 10%. Okay, so let's start with that. So we know that the net price is equal to the list price multiplied by 1 minus the discount. And if there's 2 discounts or 3 discounts, it's 1 minus the discount and 1 minus the discount. So that gives us the net price equals 30, which is the list price. Multiply that by 1 minus 45%, and multiply that by 1 minus 10%. Solve in your brackets. So that gives us N, or your net price, equals 30 multiplied by 0.55 multiplied by 0.9. That gives us a net price of $14.65. Sorry, $14.85. Okay, so my supplier gave me that price. Okay, so my net price that I have to pay my supplier is $14.85. Well, my net price is the exact same thing as my cost, okay? So translated over into the equations we're working on right now, our cost is $14.85, okay? So now we need to figure out the store's overhead expenses are 50% of cost, and normal operating profit is 30% of cost. If the manager is prepared to accept a loss of 1/4 of the overhead expenses, so they're okay with losing 1/4 of the overhead expenses, so therefore they want to cover 3/4 of the overhead expenses. What markdown rate can the store offer in order to get rid of the paint? Okay, so selling price, right? So we're trying to figure out what the selling price is to start, is our cost plus expenses plus our profit. So we know that our cost is $14.85. We know our expenses are 50% of $14.85, and we know that our profit is 30% of $14.85. Work that out, and it gives us a selling price of $26.73. Now we want to figure out what our reduced price is. So if the manager is prepared to accept a loss of 1/4 of the overhead expenses, that'll give us our reduced price. So we know that our cost is $14.85. We know that our overhead expenses are $742, but we only want to cover 3/4 of them. So that means that we're willing to reduce the price to $20.42. So if our selling price is $26.73, our reduced price is $20.42, then our discount amount is $6.31. Okay? So now in order to figure out what the markdown rate is, we take the discount amount, which is our $6.31, divide it by our original selling price, which is $26.73, multiply that by your 100%, and that gives us a markdown rate of 23.6%. Hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.